students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is refugees and asylum. And here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab terms and take some notes. Forced migration occurs when someone has no choice but to leave their home country. You have already learned about one example of forced migration in this class, and that was the forced migration of millions of people from West Africa to the Americas between 1500 and 1800, also known as the transatlantic slave trade. But in the next several lessons, you'll be looking at modern-day forced migrations, and these differ from slavery in an important way. The people you will be learning about now are fleeing extreme push factors that make it impossible to stay in their homes, and they have some control over the destination country that they flee to. As you learn about these instances of forced migration, pay attention to the push factors and to the relationship that migrants have to the new places where they end up. The people that you're going to be learning about now are called refugees. Refugees must leave their home country because of persecution, war, or violence. In other words, if they remain at home, they face the risk of imprisonment, violence, or even death. Like a refugee, an internally displaced person, or IDP, is someone who is forced to leave his or her home. But unlike refugees who flee to other countries, internally displaced persons flee their homes to other places within their country. They do not cross a border. Internally displaced persons can be thought of as refugees within their own country. Both refugees and internally displaced persons are a result of forced migration because by definition, their migration is involuntary. These terms almost always go together, and it might help you to remember that if you draw arrows on your vocab sheet connecting them. One more thing to be careful of. According to international law, economic migrants are not considered refugees or internally displaced persons. Economic migrants are people who migrate in search of better job opportunities, and most migrants today fall into this category. But although poverty or a lack of jobs in someone's home could make life impossible for them, international law does not consider people who are fleeing economic push factors as refugees. And the distinction between refugees and economic migrants is important because international law does grant refugees a special right called asylum, which economic migrants are not entitled to. An asylum is the right of refugees to remain in the first country where they arrive. So, according to international law, if someone is a refugee, and remember that means that they are fleeing persecution, war, or violence, if they're a refugee and they succeed in leaving their country and arriving in another country, then in theory they are entitled to asylum and they have permission to remain in that country. As you'll see in class, though, determining who qualifies as a refugee and therefore for asylum is a complicated task and is greatly influenced by political changes in destination countries. The last term today is brain drain. Brain drain refers to the emigration, the leaving, of a country's educated citizens. Brain drain is common in conditions of forced migration like a war, because compared to the population as a whole, the educated citizens of a country often have more resources that are needed to leave the country. So they leave first. And those resources might include money or knowledge that is needed to navigate the legal process to get asylum. However, brain drain is bad for a country because educated citizens are needed to help run things. Think about doctors, engineers, scientists, civil servants. If these people leave first, there is no one left with the knowledge to make the country run smoothly. Let's end by looking at this map of refugees by source country in 2023. This map changes every year. This year, the 5 countries with the most number of refugees are number 1, Syria, number 2, Ukraine, number 3, Venezuela, Number 4, Afghanistan. And number 5, South Sudan. Oops, my numbers are wrong on here. All right, you can ignore that. In class, you'll look at what is happening in each of these countries that is leading to forced migration. All right, it's time to review the objectives. If you don't know the answer to any of them, rewind the video and look again. Bye, students. I'll see you in class.